Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Hope everyone had a good day. We are going to go over how to conquer the multiple choice section of the AP Histories exams. I am Chris Clancy. I teach AP Euro as well as WAP. I teach at Shadow Creek High School here in Houston, Texas. I've been a reader for 5 years, 3 of which for AP Seminar and 2 for AP World. So hopefully you guys find this helpful for you guys. The tips will be a little bit applicable for bio, maybe. Not everything, though. So you'll have to kind of pick and choose what will work there and what won't. I know nothing of that test. First, before we do anything, though, I want you guys to know that these are just suggestions, okay? I am not somebody who can say that these are hard and fast rules, that if you do this, you will get a 5. What I can tell you is that there are a lot of different ways you can take the MCQ. Some will help you, some may not help you. It's really kind of up to you to pick and choose what's going to work best. So if you've been told something from your teacher that might not match, that doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean he or she is wrong. Just make sure that you are doing what's going to help you the best. Okay. So one of the things here is that regardless of which AP exam you take, if this is your first AP history exam, let's say it's world history, and you're taking APUSH next year, you're lucky you've gotten all of the skills this year you will need for next year, okay? So with that being said, let us begin. Okay, we should all see the 5-level screen. So again, we're gonna be going over tips and tricks for conquering the MCQs. Follow along and follow Think 5-able on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. They do post these reviews, the review videos online. So if you are a member, you'll have access to them all. If you're not a member yet, you'll only have access to the ones up to a certain date. So let's get right into it. What is the MCQ and how much is it worth really, right? So this is taken directly from the AP Euro exam, pre-test that's online that you can get from the College Board. So on the AP exam, the MCQ is worth 40% of your grade, all right? So that is a lot, okay? But it doesn't mean that it's not doable, okay? But the key thing that I think you need to pull out of here, I kind of highlighted here at the bottom. While a set may focus on one particular period, this says European history, it could be world history, it could be US history. The individual questions within that set may make you make connections thematically. That is just a fancy way to say that we can ask you a question about the French Revolution and tie it to World War II. Or we could ask you about colonization of the Americas and tie it to America's colonization of the Philippines, okay? Really what they're looking for here, they want to know is not just do you know the facts, but can you synthesize information from these facts to understand the nuances of the topics? So this is an example breakdown. I did AP Euro because it's the easiest one to show. We only have 4 time periods in AP Euro. I think APUSH you have 9. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's 9. World, we have 6. So what you see here, this is what our multiple choice would be taken from in AP Euro. We've got 4 time periods. It is supposed to be divided evenly. So roughly 13, 14 questions each. I'm not a math teacher, don't quote me. But more importantly, what I put here is you see all the different topics. Notice that it has that etc. That's because every time period you have in history, there are so many things that they can draw from. But there's only so much time that they can devote to that part of the test. So for example, in time period 1, we've got Renaissance, Reformation, 30 Years' War, Mannerist art, Renaissance art, Baroque art. You've got the beginnings of the scientific revolution, the beginnings of the Enlightenment, the beginnings of absolutism. They can't ask you all those questions in 13 minutes or 13 questions. It's just not enough print space. This will be about an hour, not exactly an hour, give or take. So hopefully you can stay for the whole time, Izzy. What I'm trying to show you here with this breakdown, though, is that you can go back and forth. Right? You don't have to just assume it's going to go in chronological order, right? Always go with, though, what do I know the best? And start there, maybe. Sometimes that's not the first question. Sometimes that's not the last question. So that kind of goes into our next part, which is basically, guys, it's going to be okay, right? You are going to get yourself so wrapped up and excited about this that all of the information that you do know, you're going to be so nervous that you are going to forget it. So one of the things that you need to do, and this is for any test, AP, SAT, whatever it is, you need to take a deep breath. Find some sort of mantra that works for you, kind of say it in your head right before you start the test, and then just go and do. Right? It's 55 questions in 55 minutes. Very doable as long as you remain calm. So hopefully we can help you remain calm with some of these tips here. So key thing amongst this is you need to have some sort of watch. Okay, not a smartwatch, not a watch that makes any kind of noise. You need to have some kind of watch that is silent that you can have on your wrist. Time management is key. So you have to be able to keep track of your time. You really shouldn't be spending more than a minute on each question, which then means, well, if they're all stimulus-based questions, sure, if we have time, we can move on to that. You shouldn't spend all that time analyzing a question, right? Because you don't have the time. So that takes you into the analyzation part. Your sources give you so much information on these questions. Really, you'd be surprised how much you can answer before you even read the passage. So don't go straight into reading the passage, right? Analyze the source and the question before you read the passage. This next part may be controversial. It kind of depends on your teacher. What I tell my students is you're not going to know everything, and that's okay. Do not leave a single question blank. You need to answer the question because you don't get penalized. All right. If you get penalized, that would be antithetical to why we're doing this test. So what I tell my kids is pick your favorite letter of the day. What that means is if you go into the test and your favorite letter of the day is A, any questions that you have on that you don't understand and you can't figure it out, you're going to bubble an A. A lot of people do different things here. There's that whole pick C if you don't know. That statistically isn't actually correct. I think I read it was actually B, but in reality, it's supposed to be spread 25, 25, 25, 25. And then there's other people who do A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. That does not increase your chances of getting it correct. Pick one letter, okay, your favorite letter, A, B, C, or D, and use that letter every time. That should at least kind of alleviate some of that, oh, I don't know what's going on, I can't figure out the answer. And Florian, I see that you were not asking about tonight, you were asking about the AP exam. Sophia is correct. You cannot go on to the SAQs until the proctor tells you. The last thing is your strengths. Right? You guys know history. You guys know US history. You know world history. Use that to your advantage on topics that it's giving you. You might not remember that clearly because dates help a lot. If it's giving you a source from world history that's from 600 BCE, well, what's going on at 600 BCE? Right? It's not going to assume that you know everything. Yes, Mr. Tyler's correct. Us teachers do get penalized. So I would say try to use the knowledge that you have about other topics in the same time period to help you answer this question. The test can sometimes give you answers to those questions that come from the same time period as well. All right. Let's kind of get into this and break one down. This is taken from the AP European History Practice Exam. All right, so not every one of you is in AP Euro, but most of you should have studied at least the French Revolution. So the first thing I tell my students is look at the source. Okay, the source here, you have the Song of the Poissade. It's in October 1789. So I tell my kids, first thing they need to do is they need to write down what is going on in 1789. You've got the French Revolution. You have the ending of the American Revolution, the beginning of the constitutional period of the US, right? You've got the breakdown of the French economy as France and England and Spain are all fighting after the American Revolution. With that being known, could you answer questions about the time period without reading the passage? You should be able to, okay? Because the French Revolution, the American Revolution, those are things that we're going to ask you very specific types of questions. Okay, we want to know, do you understand the development of democracy? Do you understand the radicalization of revolutions? Are you able to understand how economics plays into why these revolutions happened? So when we do this, there's three things you need to look at to get the correct answer. The first is the source. Where is it coming from? Who is it coming from? Is it an image or is it writing? Because that's going to make a big difference. If it's something from an early time period, if it's a writing, we expect it to be from only specific types of people. Not everybody knew how to read and write. If it's an image and it's like a painting or it's a wood carving, again, how are they going to have that made? We're going to be looking at who is going to commission it. So the source is very, very important in understanding what they're going to ask you. The next is the time periods, which I just talked about. If you look at the date, that's going to tell you the topics that the questions could be about. So 1648, I'm going to think that my topics would be the end of the 30 Years' War. It could be the beginnings of absolutism and the constitutionalism in England. American history, I don't remember enough to actually say, so don't quote me on that one. But in world history, right, we're talking about the end of the Ming Dynasty. We're talking about the interregional trade with the gunpowder empires and things like that. And then last, and probably the most important thing, read the question. Don't skip to the answers. You need to read the question. Read it once, read it twice, read it 3 times, but read the question. From these 3 things, you should theoretically have a closer understanding of what they're asking you and be able to get to the answer. If you can't, this is when I tell my students that they actually can analyze the passage, all right? But generally speaking, you don't want to do that because, again, you are under a time crunch. And so if you can know the source, the time period, and what the question's asking, that can save you quite a bit of time so that later on, you can review what you have answered. So let's look at this one. We got the same source. So we got the source from 1789. This is a question that goes along with the source. So the source here, the Song of the Poissard, the Paris Market Women. Does anybody know what this is referencing? Maybe. Okay, I'm going to guess no one answered. So this is maybe talking about the March on Versailles when the women in Paris marched with their pitchforks and their knives against the King of France. Yes, the October March. And so the question here, right, it's going to be about the October March. So with that, the first thing you want to do is look at the question itself. Okay? The events referred to in the song led most directly to which of the following? This is where a lot of people make their mistakes because they read the question, they go to answer it. They don't read it again, right? There's a very big key word here that will guide your answer, okay? Most directly. Not directly, not least directly, but most directly. That means that in theory, all of these could be correct. But what we're looking for is what is the most correct. So now, using that knowledge, using that we know it's the Women's March and the time period, we start looking at the answers. And that's the first thing I tell my kids is look for the ones that don't match the time period. Because if they don't match the time period, then they obviously can't be the answer. Because it doesn't make sense for you to be talking about something that is in 1789, but the answer you bubble in is about 1910, and they're not asking you to compare the 2 time periods. So with this, we have A, the formalization of a constitutional monarchy, B, the creation of a republican government in France, C, the installation of Napoleon as emperor of the French, and D, the restoration of the monarchy. So quickly type it on the right. Which 2 would you mark off automatically that don't fit this time period? Give you guys like 30 seconds to write down. B and D. Yes, very good. So if we look at those answer choices, C, the installation of Napoleon as Emperor of the French, that was in the 1800s. Right, we're talking about when he became the Emperor of France, Notre Dame, and he was elected, right, as the emperor. D, the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy, that's after the downfall of Napoleon, okay? So that's even further into the 1800s. Neither of those match the time period. So we still haven't read the passage. Automatically, we're able to get rid of two of the answers, C and D, which leaves us with the next two, right? A and B. Now, if we look at A and B, again, both of these are correct, okay? Because they're both talking about what can happen. We know that in the French Revolution, they didn't immediately go to chopping off Louis's head, right? They tried to make it work with the constitutional monarchy. Then eventually they did chop his head off. So this is where I would say that you can take the 10, 20 seconds to analyze the passage and see where you could pull out your answer. So looking at our passage here, very quickly, to Versailles like bragging lads, we brought with us all our guns. We had to show, though we were but women, our courage that no one can reproach us for. Now we won't have to go so far. When we want to see our king, we love him with a love without equal, since he's come to live in our capital. Okay, so with that, does that sound like they want to harm the king? Probably not. Could it be sarcastic, though? Probably is as well. Okay, I mean, these are very much people who are poor and they want food. But with those right there, people are already answering. A is the one that makes the most sense. Because in that one line right there, when we want to see our king. They're not saying when we want to kill our king, when we want to get rid of our king, when we want to chop the king's head off. No, it's definitely A, because what they're referring to is the move from Versailles to the palace in Paris that starts with a T that I cannot pronounce. Okay? Exactly. They wanted to have more influence on him. And that's what a constitutional monarchy is, right? The monarch is there, doesn't really have power. The people are the ones who have the power. So A is the correct answer here. But again, notice what we did not do. We didn't go straight to the passage. We read the source. We activated the knowledge that we have of the time period around the source. We read the question multiple times. And then we looked and got rid of the answers that don't match. And finally, we went back to the source to get our answer. That's why it's very key here that you practice using the source and the question to answer these. How do you remember the time period? That's a hard question to answer. I would say one of the best ways to remember the time period is key events. Maybe using the ideas that are big enough that we would maybe call it periodization. We used to test on that. We don't do it any longer. 1789, it represents a really big shift in Europe because we're going away from monarchy, we're going away from one-man rule, and we're using republicanism. I gotta look one up. I honestly did not put one in here. So if you give me a minute, I'll look one up in a second after we go through all of this, okay? Did it change? There we go. So, so these are what I would call the top 5 tips that I give, top 5 tips that I've heard other teachers give. These help not just on AP tests, again, other things. So the first one, skim over the test. What does that mean? It means take a moment, read through quickly what the questions are asking you, okay? It used to be that, like when I was in high school, the test went from easy to hard, and progressively they got harder. We also got penalized. It's no longer like that, okay? The questions are theoretically mixed together, okay? Which means the time periods are mixed together. If you are looking at these different time periods quickly as you go through, you can start to, in the back of your mind, bring up that information that you know about them. 2, utilizing your time properly. It is okay to skip a question. You don't have to answer it right away. When you skip a question, make a little mark next to the question or put a little dog ear on your piece of paper so that you can go back to it later. If you don't have the answer even after going to the questions after that, that's where your answer of the day comes in. Okay, that's where you pick the answer that you walked in the room going, I'm going to use A for what I do not know or I cannot figure out. The key here, though, is making sure that you utilize your time properly. You really shouldn't be spending more than a minute on each of these questions. If you're spending 2 or 3 minutes on a question, that means you're taking time away from other questions later on, and you're going to be scrambling to answer them very quickly at the end. For number 3, read the question. Read it again and read it one more time just to make sure that you understand it. All right, if we go back to that question that we just answered, okay, a lot of people are only going to read this question once, and they're going to miss that big word, most. They're going to miss that this question's giving you a bunch of answers that could technically be correct. But because you didn't pay attention to that most, you're not going to understand what it's actually asking you. So make sure that you read that question multiple times before you answer it, okay? You guys are typing a lot of questions very fast. I'll try to get back to them when I'm done because I can't keep up as you type. So number 4, check your answers. Now here's the thing. When I was in school, I was told to check my answers at the end of the test. I'm not a big fan of that for 2 reasons. One, when you go back at the end of the test and check your answers, are you really going to change things, or are you just looking and making sure you bubble things in? For me, I never changed things. I was just making sure I didn't miss any bubbles. 2, when you go back at the end of the test and you go and you're going through them one by one, you have a tendency to question your answers. Now, for me, I am the type of person that when I answer a question, I'm done. I'm not going to go back to it. But there is a way that you can go back to a question that you've answered and change your answer without worrying about, am I second guessing myself? And that's if the topic comes up later in the test. So if you had a question, let's say that was about American colonization in question 5, about the Mayflower Compact. And then in question 25, it was about the development of the Constitution, which, I mean, they're related to each other, right? Mayflower Compact, the rule of law and everyone's equal, things like that. Constitutionalism, you can use those to answer each other. But not every question is going to be like that. So unless you know without a doubt that you answered that question wrong because of another question on the test, I wouldn't recommend changing your answer. Now, that's just me. That's what I tell my students. Your teachers might not actually agree with that, and that's okay. I would say do what makes you the most comfortable. And if you agree with your teacher, then go with them. If you want to do what I say, go with me. Again, do what makes you the most comfortable here. The other thing about checking your answers, don't wait until the last minute to bubble in your answer sheet. Bubble in as you go. So if you check your answers on that page, you've only got 4, 5, maybe 6 questions. You can make sure you bubble them in and then move on. But if you go back at the end to bubble and you make one mistake, that can have a really big consequence. And we're trying to avoid that here, right? The last thing I heard from when I was younger and in college, and I heard it again today from a guy who works with Crash Course doing study skills. And it was talking about setting. And I remember that when I teach AP psychology and we talk about memory, setting makes a really big deal, okay? I don't know about your state. In Texas, we have something called STAR, and almost never are the students in the classroom where they learned the subject they're being tested on, which makes no sense, okay? Because honestly, if you are in room 1501 and you're learning history in 1501, and we take you to room 5 and test you in room 5, you might forget a lot of what you learned simply because the setting is different. So one of the things I tell my kids, and I remember to tell them again, is try to think back to what you were doing in your classroom when this topic came up. Because if you were doing, we just finished the Cold War and the Holocaust and World War II, we did an activity where they had to figure out who was the not acceptable person by the Nazis, okay? My kids will forever remember that because of the way that we went about learning it in my room. But if they were to go to another room and it asked them a question about how Nazis classified race and the different ways that the Nuremberg laws were imposed, they might not remember that because they're not in the room where I taught it to them the way that I taught it to them. So that's where I say, take a moment, try to remember, okay, we're covering Andrew Jackson or Buddhism. And in my classroom, my teacher taught me A, B, and C. You're taking your memory back to that time frame. You're bringing up more information than you consciously know. It will help you answer the question. So these are like the top 5 tips that I would say. Again, guys, you need to make sure that you stay calm. Okay, this is one test or 2 or 3, however many you're taking, but it is not your entire life. It does not show whether you understood all the material or whether you didn't understand all the material. What it showed us is at that one moment in time that you could remember this one fact. Okay, so take a deep breath and breathe, and you're gonna be okay, right? So I've got about 30 minutes left, which is what I wanted to answer questions. So I'm going to go back here and read some of them, try to answer them. Sophia, I'm going to try to get to an AP World History question. Give me a minute. Let me see if I can answer these other ones because I'm going to have to Google one. Okay, so are there any tactics to remember the most important events to cover everything for AP Euro? Yes, Kelly. There are. When I was in training for AP Euro, my trainer taught me the best thing ever. It's called Kevin Bacon dates. Okay. Many of you probably have no idea who Kevin Bacon is. He is an actor who is really well known, at least for what I remember, is Footloose. But in Hollywood, there's something called the Kevin Bacon number, or the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. What that means is you can tie any single person in Hollywood by 6 other people or less to Kevin Bacon. You can do the same thing in Euro with important dates. You can tie 1555 and the Peace of Augsburg to 1648 and the end of the 30 Years' War to 1683, don't quote me on that, the Glorious Revolution and the English Bill of Rights to 1789 and the French Revolution. And what you do is you find the ways that they're all connected. And how are they all connected? Religion, right? 1555, Catholics and Lutherans peace. 1648, Europe's not going to go to war over religion again. Everyone's going to be allowed to live their life. The English Glorious Revolution and the English Bill of Rights, freedom of religion. 1789 and the French Revolution, the abolishment of Catholicism in France. So Kevin Bacon dates is what I would recommend. I can find a way to put it in this presentation so when it gets uploaded, you can have that for you. But I hope that answers. Sophia, how do you answer questions fast that have really long passages? Don't read the passage to begin with. Okay, Sophia, what I would recommend is read the source, read the question, then read the answers. If you still don't know the answer, then you can go back to the source. But don't start reading the source to begin with. You'd be surprised about how much knowledge that you have just by those 3 steps. From there, skim the source. Okay, kind of speed read it. You don't need to read the entire word for word. You want to look for key phrases. So let's say the source was, I'm trying to think of a world history example here, Julius Caesar. Okay, Julius Caesar is going to be mainly about government and about the Roman Empire. So look for things in that source that talk about how he believed government should go. It's talking about, to the glory of Jupiter and to Venus. It's not really going to be that important unless the question's asking you who are the Roman gods that he would be praying to. I don't think they would ask you that, but I've been proven wrong before, so I could be wrong. Zoe, do you think it would be beneficial to have the amendments, presidents, Supreme Court cases memorized for APUSH, or is it not worth the time? I don't know the answer to that question. I can tell you when I took APUSH, I did not memorize the Supreme Court cases. I did know the presidents and the amendments. I would say the amendments are really important. The big Supreme Court cases are really important. The presidents, I would say yes, but I am not an APUSH teacher, so please don't quote me on that. You might want to check with somebody who teaches APUSH to make sure. I know if you do remember the Supreme Court cases, that will help you when you take AP Government. Looks like Katie there answered it a little bit, and I've lost my space. There we go. I would do what he said, which was read from the source. Very good. Can we do some more examples from multiple choice questions? Give me a second. We will bring those up. Yes. 1688, that was the Glorious Revolution. Thank you very much. AP Exam Prep app has full link through one for practice exams. Other practice exams that you could look at, I think Fiveable is coming out with one. Tom Ritchie has one, has an app that's called Romulus. I know he has it for world history and European history. I don't know if he has one for APUSH. So I will look into that. Those are practice multiple choice style questions. So there's that. Practice guides that you might recommend. Barron's is a good one. I really like Princeton Review. They usually come with 2 to 3 different ones that you can use in the Princeton Review. Any of the review books, though, understand they can have mistakes. We were talking about the European History Review book the other day in my school, and there's a really big one in there on the FRQ section. So just be careful. Nothing is perfect, right? For AP World, what period should we be learning now? Also, what is your opinion on the best way to review? Honestly, Elizabeth, if you're learning AP World now, you should be in period 6. Theoretically, you should be finishing. I don't know what your school year is like, though. In Texas, in my school district, we started the 2nd week of August, so I was able to finish now. The best way to review is, for me, not to go through everything. I know that seems counterintuitive, but if I go through everything, I'm going to be wasting my time. Okay, because there's certain topics that I don't know. I don't know if your school offers you a mock exam, but I would take a mock exam and see what you score on the multiple choice there. And then use the score you got on the multiple choice to look at the time periods that you need to study. You might be really good at period 1 and period 3, but period 4 and period 5, you just got nothing. So you need to really focus on period 4 and period 5. And then maybe bring in period 2, period 6, and then, if time permits, 1 and 3. But again, that's kind of up to you. So I would say take a mock exam, see where you are from there, and go in order of, okay, I don't know this time period at all, study there, to I need a little bit more, and keep going down from there. Crash Course is a great thing to use for review, not for an intro to, for me at least. So I would say use Crash Course definitely for review. Freemanpedia, absolutely amazing for review. So definitely use that for world. My kids are having their period 6 test next week too, Sophia, so don't worry. I have to teach myself from World War I to modern day for AP Euro. What would be the things I would neglect when studying? Oh, Emily, first, I am so sorry to hear that, because that is a lot to teach yourself. Don't overlook decolonization. That is a very big thing as part of the Cold War. Okay, a lot of times we tend to sweep it under the rug, but make sure you go over decolonization, and make sure you go over the 1990s and early 2000s. All right, so those are the 3 things I think most people would neglect to cover. What do you recommend I should do if I have a lot of questions that I'm stuck on, can't answer quickly? I tend to spend a lot of time skipping questions, leaving them unanswered. Okay, Joseph, first, never leave them unanswered. You are going to walk in with your favorite letter of the day so that you can answer those questions, all right? Second, if you still can't figure it out, you need to move on, okay? No more than a minute, even a minute and a half is pushing it. And this is where learning how to play the test against itself. So if you've got questions that are on the Cold War on one section, theoretically, you could have questions later, or you may have had them previously about World War II, or about, détente, Brezhnev, Khrushchev, very specific things in the Cold War that may help you answer those questions. So kind of make a little star, make a little dog ear on your paper. That's what I would recommend, to kind of use the test against itself. But in the end, don't leave it blank. Put something down on that paper because you don't get penalized. Favorite letter of the day is what I would recommend. What time period events are usually asked a lot? Camilla, they're supposed to be evenly split. AP Euro, if I'm not mistaken, is the only one that is that way. AP World History is period 1 is 5%, period 2 is 15%, and then the other 3, 4, 5, and 6 are 20% each. So that's what I would say. If that helps you, hopefully. AP Word Exam, is it possible to take notes during the 15-minute read? Yes, Newman, it is very possible, okay, to do those AP notes. Within that 15-minute time period, you're kind of going to use the same tactics from the multiple choice as you will on the DBQ. The source gives you a lot of information. The time period of the source gives you a lot of information, okay? Giving you that along with the topic of the question, that should help you go through them much faster. And not all of the sources are going to be passages. You can have maps, you could have artwork too, which tends to allow you a little bit more leeway in time frame in analyzing those documents. But I would say 15 minutes for 7 documents, very doable, as long as you take the time to not get flustered and rush yourself. That's why a watch is very important. Yeah, College Board does give out tests, so you can do that. Princeton Review apparently has 4 in their book. I mean, Kelly, I would say for the writing, 2, 3, and 4, yes. For the multiple choice, they do say that it's supposed to be evenly split. So, I mean, I don't write the questions for College Board. I can't really answer that question or make a comment. Otherwise, then it's supposed to be that way. How do you pick between 2 answer choices that seem equally correct? All right, good question. Let's go back to this one right here. Okay, so we're using this as our example because it's what we've got. So A and B, okay, 2 questions, they both do seem correct because guess what? They both are. Okay, the French Revolution did eventually lead to a Republican government in France, but the French Revolution also did lead to a constitutional monarchy in France. So how do we choose what's the right answer? Okay. And what I would say is this is where your time period knowledge comes in. Question B is too early for the, it's not too early. I'm sorry, it's too early in the time period for this. We did not see a Republican government in France until 1792. Sorry, it's late, I'm tired. So I might be off by a year. So that's why it's not B. Right? We saw that constitutional monarchy first. And so that's how you pick between those 2 answers that seem correct. Hopefully that helps, right? And Kelly, yeah, dates definitely help with everything. Do you think the modern day economic will be on the test? UN, EU, EEC. Yes, it will be. Your test, whether it is APUSH, Euro, or WAP, the rule of thumb is about a decade before now. So we're in 2019. I would say you could have questions that go up to 2008. With that being said, though, I have not seen questions that have, at least on the writing section, that deal with topics which are not resolved. So for example, the 2008 financial crisis, that's pretty much over. It's resolved for America. But if I'm in AP Euro, it's not really completely over yet. Greece still has a lot of problems because of that. There's still a lot of flux with the euro. Is it going to stay? Is it going to go? Is it going to work? With world history, like you wouldn't see the Arab Spring, for example. I would not expect you to, at least. I could be wrong, right? But that doesn't mean you can't use that information in your writing. It just means that they're not going to expect you to know it, okay? If it's going to strengthen your argument, let's say about economics and you want to talk about the Arab Spring, because the Arab Spring, a lot of it had to do with economics, right? A lot of young adults, but didn't have jobs. They have an education, but the government's not doing anything to make sure that they can provide for themselves. You could write about that. But again, I mean, that's really going to be up to your choice. So I would say 2009, 2008 is the cutoff, but it's, not a hard and fast rule. Do you have any advice on LEQs? Yes, my advice on LEQs. Don't think that you need to write a perfect paper, okay? You've got an hour and 40 minutes to do the DBQ and the LEQ. Take away the 15 minutes, you've got an hour and 25, right? Now to do both of them. Really, you should spend about 35 minutes on the LEQ. That's what I tell my students. It's a rough draft. That's what you're writing. You're writing a rough draft about whatever the topic is. Okay, rough drafts have mistakes. Rough drafts are not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Don't do what I call the spaghetti method, where you just take everything you know and throw it down on the paper. Okay, that actually doesn't help, because then your reader has to go through and pick out the information that is actually relevant to the topic. Okay, if the topic is about comparing the spread of Buddhism and Christianity, and you start bringing in the spread of Islam and the spread of Confucianism and Taoism and Zoroastrianism, that's all great information. But does it really help strengthen your argument, or does it make your reader have to start hunting? Okay, if it makes your reader have to hunt, it's something you have to question. Why are you putting it down? Because the questions are really formulated to show us what you know about that specific topic. Now, with that being said, obviously, one of the points is the outside information on the DBQ and evidence on the LEQ. If it's not really that pertinent, it's just kind of like, oh, look at me, I know all of these, esoteric knowledge. That's really great, and I would love to read an LEQ like that. But if you can't guarantee that it's going to get you a higher score on that LEQ, I wouldn't really recommend putting it in there. I would just say stick to what the rubric is asking. Okay? If the rubric is asking you to compare Buddhism and Christianity, compare Buddhism and Christianity. Maybe in your final paragraph, bring in the spread of other religions, and that can bump your complexity up. Okay? Hope that helps. What should you try to gather from the source? Is it Hippo, etc.? I'm not quite sure what you're meaning. Can you explain a little bit further? In the chat, what do you mean? What main topics do you suggest reviewing before the test? Alex, that depends on which test you're talking about. For AP Euro, main topics I would say are, Renaissance Reformation, absolutism, French Revolution, definitely the French Revolution. The 1800s, everything. World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. AP US History, I can't really help you. I don't remember it enough to help you. I'm sorry, I apologize. AP World, you need to look at how the interaction of peoples and ideas, I would say, is a big thing to review before the test. How can you tell what historical thinking skill is being tested on LEQ? Very good question, Numan. Yeah, sorry, Alex, I can't answer AP US very much. I wish I could help you more. My guess is constitutionalism is going to be a big thing. Jackson, the Civil War. I'm trying to pull this knowledge up from 16 years ago when I took the AP exam, and it has changed since then. The Cold War, I would bet, would be a big thing. I'm not sure. Newman, how can you tell what historical thinking skills? That's a very good question. So there are key words that you can look for that will tell you what the historical thinking skill is. Okay, so let's say it's continuity and change, right? If it's an LEQ, one of the things they could say is evaluate the extent to which the roles of women stayed the same between the time period of 1750 and 1900. Okay, if it said that, the words stayed the same are a hint that it's CCOT, change in continuity. If it said evaluate the extent to which the French Revolution differed from the Haitian Revolution, that one's a little easier to figure out. They tend to use similarity or difference in those ones. So for that, that's a little easier. For continuity, I would say evaluate the extent to which the roles of religion remained the same after the Protestant Reformation. Okay, that's another example of change and continuity and change. Remained the same being continuity. And whoever asked about globalization, yes, very important topic, all three classes. With cause and effect, this one, they do ask, evaluate the extent to which the printing press was a cause to the Protestant Reformation. That's a very simple one. But they tend to pick one or two things and want you to say the cause or the effect. What I would say is in your DBQ or LEQ, you need to write about both, whether it's CCOT, similarities and differences, or causation. You need to write about both. Write about the causes, write about the effects. Write about the topic and however it stayed the same, and then how it changed over time. Write about, why these two events were the same, but also write about why they were different. That last point, complexity, the unicorn point, it's really difficult to get because it's those nuances that we're looking for to see if you understand those similarities and differences, or the continuities and the changes. It's not something that is easy, even to adults. Okay, there are times when I am in class and I'm trying to explain this to students, and I just stand there and I'm like, I don't know. Because we're human, okay? Again, we expect these to be like a rough draft, and that's okay, all right? What you're really trying to do when you are showing your historical thinking skill is you're showing us beyond just the, I know when an event happened. I know the who, the what, the when, the where, but most importantly, I know the why, okay? Think about any classes you've taken that are history that were not AP or not preparing you for an exam like this. A lot of the times the questions tend to be, what happened on this day? Okay, not really the why something happened. So I would say that's the best thing to know and do on LEQ or DBQ, okay? Okay, sorry for the confusion. I was trying to ask if there was a most important thing to gather from the source, like to know or infer the class, bias, beliefs, audience, etc. I'm assuming you're talking about the multiple choice questions. If you are, I would say yes, there are some things to take into account. Class especially, okay? Because if we are talking like in the 1800s for Euro, or even for APUSH, yes, in any time period for world, right? Class is going to change the viewpoint of what the question is going to ask about, right? If it's asking you, about reading from an uneducated person that was written down by somebody who was of a higher class, maybe that brings in that person's bias. Maybe that changes that person's beliefs because they are a first-person witness to whatever horrors those poor people were going through, right? The word bias, I would say, is a dirty word. We call it the dirty word in my class. Okay, we call it the B word in my class. It's not allowed. Okay, because everything, whether it is art, whether it is a diary, whether it is a graph, every single thing produced has bias in one form or another. Okay, so we are not allowed to use that word in my class. What we talk about is how it shows the beliefs. That's a better word of the author. Or how it tries to convey a message to a wider audience to get them to believe that author. So be careful about bias. That would be something I would tell you. Would I be penalized if in an LEQ or DBQ I say something wrong? For example, Louis XV made Versailles. So that is yes and no. I mean, there's not a hard and fast rule. Sophia's kind of right. We don't penalize, okay? What we do, it's known as additive grading. We look for what you did right, okay? So if you were, and again, this is not a hard and fast rule, so I'm not giving you any kind of like insider secrets here. If you were to write in your entire DBQ or LEQ that Louis XV made Versailles, I don't know if we could overlook that, okay? Because it does change the time period of your writing, okay? If you were to talk about, the building of Versailles, and then you're talking about, the building of it, and then you go, oh, Louis XV did it, but later on you correct it, more than likely they're going to overlook it, okay? What I tell my students is that, one, you've got to know your names, okay? And this is a Euro question. It's looking like there are a lot of Henrys, there are a lot of Louis. You got to know the numbers and the time periods. That's very, very important. Because if we're talking about the War of the Three Henrys, and you are talking about Henry the Ninth of England, which there wasn't, if memory serves me correctly, you're way off, okay? If you are talking about Edward the Seventh, when you should be talking about Edward the Sixth, that is actually a really far time period. Okay, you've got to be, so names can cause you to make mistakes. And so that's why we do additive grading. But if it's a repeated mistake, I would say that's when we might not be able to overlook the mistake that you had. So I hope that it helps you with that. Let me go look here for questions. All right, so when taking practice MCQ exams, I often find myself unable to choose between two really good answers. Do you have any good tips on how to choose? Should I just guess? Katie, I hope that I answered this for you earlier, but just in case, look at like what I'm presenting now. The source time period really helps, knowing what's going on in that time period, and then making sure that you paid really close attention to what that question is asking. I would say using process of elimination is going to help you here. There's one little trick that you can use in process of elimination. It can be time consuming, so be very careful, all right, if you do this. One thing that you can do is you go through each one of these answer choices that I've got projected. The formalization of a constitutional monarchy in France. Is anything in that statement wrong? If it's wrong, then it can't be the answer, okay? The creation of a Republican government in France. Again, is anything wrong with that statement? If it's wrong, it can't be the answer. If C said the installation of Louis Philippe as emperor of the French, that's wrong. Okay, Louis Philippe did not become emperor of France. Louis Philippe was the king. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. And an emperor and a king are actually different. So that's how you would use it, where answer by answer, you can kind of narrow it down. But again, that is time consuming. So really knowing your time periods with the sources and making sure you pay attention to the questions will really help. So I hope that helps you out there, Katie. What should you do when you get to the MCQ section and completely blank on everything? Scream and throw pencils, quietly contemplate life's greatest mysteries, etc. Owen, if you completely blank on everything, it is perfectly okay. All right, you're not the first person who's opened up a test and gone, oh my God, I know nothing. You need to take a breath, right? Close the test, count to 10, and start over. Okay, you can do this. You know the information. Don't let the test make your whole view of yourself dependent upon the score you get, okay? If you take the test and you try your hardest and you only get a 3 and you shot for a 4, dude, you got a 3. That's really good. Okay, if you wanted a 5 and you got a 4, dude, you got a 4. That's amazing. Okay, it's not always about the actual score that you get. Sometimes it's about the fact that you did it and you can say that you did it. Okay, so if you open it up and you're completely blank, close it, take a deep breath, count to 10, and start over. You're going to be fine. I promise. Okay. On the AP World History exam, is it possible to take notes during the 15-minute reading time period? I think I answered this for you, Newman, already. I'm going to answer it again just in case anybody missed it. Yes, it is possible. Use the tricks from the MCQ to do the analysis of the DBQ. Time period of the source, this author of the source, where is the source coming from? And then compare that to the question that's being asked. Using that, you should be able to go into Hippo very quickly. And remember, you don't have to have the H, the I, the P, and the P for all 7 documents. You only have to have one of them. So if you want to do historical context for all 7 documents, be my guest. Probably not going to be the easiest, but you can, okay? Do what comes naturally to that document. Sometimes, intended audience comes out way more easy than the point of view, or the context comes out way easier than the purpose of it. Just be careful with context that you're not trying to double dip. All right, you can't use contextualization for the whole question as a contextualization for a document. Okay. Michelle, you asked, what is Hippo? Hippo is a acronym for analyzing documents for the document-based question. H is for historical context. Some people say historical situation. I is for the intended audience. The P is for purpose. The other P is for point of view. And the O is for outside information. So you need to do O. I tell my kids, do O, all 7 documents. You should be putting in 7 pieces of outside information. You should be hipping all 7 documents. All right. That way you've got a little cushion there if you get one wrong or you get 2 wrong, all right? Because you got to have 4. So if you've only got 7 documents and you only do 4, you've got no cushion. Okay. So Michelle, I'll put something on this presentation for you so that you can see it, and that will help you later. All right, so what are the main topics would be most important to review before the test? Alex, I think you said that was APUSH. Again, my guess here is going to be like colonization, revolution, development of political parties, Jackson, Civil War, World Wars, and the Cold War. But that is a complete and utter guess. I honestly don't know. I don't teach APUSH. I apologize. Hopefully one of your fellow AP students here can help you out with that. And then last, how can I learn my AP World History key concepts? Oh, that is a big question. Yes, I'll state it one more time in a second, Kelly. The key concepts for AP World, there are a lot of key concepts, okay? I would say don't try to learn every single key concept, okay? Because you probably already know more than you think you do, okay? I would say focus on the ones you don't remember and study those. And then once you're done, go back to all the ones you do know and review them. There's not it's not a magic bullet here. I can't predict what's going to be on the test. I wish I could. God knows I wish I could. My students would love it, right? Focus on what you know and what you don't know, and then go from there. So I hope that helps, T. Guys, it's been an hour. You guys have been great. You guys had great questions. I know I didn't get to any of the practice questions for AP World. I apologize. So I will see if I can put some examples in here before this gets uploaded. For those of you that are in AP Euro, Saturday, I am going to be doing a review of the 1800s, the long century. I don't know about you, but it's the stuff of my nightmares. So I would recommend that you guys come to that. Sophia, there's going to be some more crowdcasts for world history. I hope this really helped you guys. Thank you all again for coming. And you guys have a great night and good luck, and remain calm. You got this, okay? Have a good evening. Bye, guys.